Hello everyone, COVID spiking everywhere, and it's the $1 billion clown farm Christmas special, but for real this time. We made a Christmas terrain piece. I made a Christmas terrain piece to cope with mental decline. That's what all Warhammer is just making little things to cope with mental decline. We're taking the unbearable suffering of real existence and channeling that into the fun, grimdark, abstract, distant, unbearable pain of existence, which is the 41st millennium. Today I made a little baby head shrine, and you're gonna watch me make it. Or not, you could leave, but I'm gonna make it. How long are my intros? Is this too much or not enough? I don't remember how long my intros are. Okay, here we go. Step 1. Go outside in your balcony and locate the disgusting piece of hardboard that's been slowly collecting dust for close to 3 years. Step 2. Locate your trash collection, a very healthy and normal habit that your whole family is sure to appreciate. Step 3. Make the baby head try on various pieces of trash like they're in a makeover sequence. Next, get ready to glue this brick texture down, which will ultimately just be covered in a shit ton of leaves and be completely imperceptible to the human eye. I decided this child required no trash and used one of the foam cylinders from the Stompa video instead. I covered the cylinder in Mod Podge to protect it and improve the texture. You could use Elmer's or whatever you have here too, but I like Mod Podge more because it doesn't come off with water, so you can water down paint and put it on top after without destroying the bond. Babies love sand. Why not sand? And to soul bond the sand to our child, I covered the sand in spray adhesive. These crosses I should have put down before applying the sand, but it's never too late for Christ. You can get basically all this stuff at Hobby Lobby. The baby heads are from Home Depot. I got them during Halloween, but assuming your local hobby and craft store didn't file a lawsuit against the US government for the right to deny contraceptives to employees in September of 2012, you shouldn't go to Hobby Lobby and you should go to them instead. Big fan of Gorilla White Glue. It's the kind that doesn't foam up. It's what I use to glue most of the stuff in this video. You can just go hog wild with it without worrying about coming back to a concrete bubble bath later. I used the statue of Boudet I bought from a mall sword store when I was like 12. A, because he's holding a big sack and kind of looks like Santa Claus. B, because I felt like this terrain piece didn't have enough problematic iconography already. Well, look, another very cool basing decoration I don't realize is gonna be destroyed by 1,000 leaves yet. Yeah, that's a really good place to glue that down, Tyler. I'm sure everyone will still be able to notice it. I decided that my hands didn't have enough glue on them yet, and the only way to fix that was to attempt to magnetize something. I glued 3 magnets to the bottom of the baby head, then painted the bottom of those magnets blue, and used them as a stamp to indicate where I should drill holes for the other magnets on the foam base. I used this broken Japanese mask keychain I had to decorate the forehead, and I filled it with skulls. I imagine that narratively this is some kind of shrine to lost children in a remote Imperium world who disappeared in some sort of demon Pied Piper situation, and the skulls adorning the statue are the only skulls that could be found of the remaining children. Here's a shot of some moss. These 3D printed Greebles I used to make the baby head look a little more 40k were made by the YouTuber Miscast. He has a link on his site, which I'll put in the video description if you want to download them. They're great. And I attached them to the model using some, what the fuck do you call that stuff? Something. Milliput. Here's me drilling a hole for the magnets. The Mod Podge is completely dry by now. I used the digital sculpting program ZBrush to make some toys to decorate the shrine with. In the narrative of the shrine, I assume that parents who live in the village nearby would leave presents every year for either as a tribute to the kids who have been lost or in the hopes that they'll come back and claim them. But because everything around the shrine is going to be so weathered and dirty, I want to make it seem like these presents have been sitting here for a very long time, and that maybe the village where the kids disappeared from initially doesn't exist anymore either. I tried to find a lot of recent footage of Chernobyl to use as reference, just to look at stuff that has been abandoned for roughly how long I'd imagine this town has been abandoned for and the shrine has been non-maintained for. I printed off 3D models I made, then left them to cure under UV light for a while. All the magnets had dried at this point, and I tested the baby head to see if it worked. Well, look, magnets still work. Who knew? And here's this little LED nipple I bought, which is the whole reason we magnetized the head to begin with. Sorry, I think I never mentioned that. That's why. We have an LED nipple. There's some slight print defects, but I didn't really care. I figured after all the weathering, and because these are going to be kind of damaged looking anyways, it was going to be totally passable in the state that they were in. That barrel is from the Miscast download as well. I used clear glue at some point to make tiers for the baby head. They were covered up in the paint stage. I'm not sure how I feel about them yet. I might re-add them tomorrow now that the head is painted. Wow, something about the future of this project neither of us know yet. How cool. You and me both, viewer. And I glued all the decorations down with Gorilla Clear Glue as well. I used the dark green primer to prime. I ran out of dark green primer halfway through, and I would have liked to use black primer from a spray can for the rest of the model. Partially because A, it takes way less time and there's no reason to airbrush this whole thing by hand, but B, primer works as an adhesive, and I think would have helped the rocks and the foliage stick to the base a lot more. Usually the reason why I base my models before I prime them is because the primer will help like flock and sand. Do people still use the word flock? I don't know. It'll help base stuff stick to bases more. And I went over all the foliage and the rocks with a dark brown paint mixed with a little bit of primer, primarily as an adhesive. These are all the colors I used to paint the first stages of the baby head. Pulled up a lot of reference of weathered statues on my phone, and I didn't really go in with that much of a plan. I know I want it to be like kind of concrete looking. I didn't want it to be a metal statue. The decorations are going to be bronze, but I wanted the statue itself to look like it was made out of cement or stone. I started applying heavy dry brushes and just like different splotches of paint in different areas, trying to create a lot of color variation throughout the whole thing, and kind of figuring out exactly what I wanted as I went, but being mindful of the reference I had pulled up earlier the whole time. I tried to use the natural texture of the brush to create more patterns. One of the big problems with the baby head is it just like looks so transparently like plastic. And I was afraid of ruining the detail, so I didn't want to go over it with like 3D texture that much, but I was hoping between a little bit of sanding I did to add some scratches and the texture I layered on through dry brushing, it would look a little more like concrete and a little bit less like plastic, and I think I ultimately did a pretty good job of doing that. For color variation, I added a lot of different green and brown washes layered on top of each other too. Mostly with acrylics to start, but eventually with enamels as well. Here's a pro tip unrelated to miniature painting. Don't try microwaving frozen waffles. They can't be done. That's what I did in between recording this section of voiceover and the previous section, and let me tell you, it's not a good time. Food was not meant to be this consistency. Here I am applying a heavily watered down orange wash to the recesses of the statue after dry brushing in bronze. I also applied a lighter orange wash to the concrete part of the statue, but ultimately it was a little too watered down and didn't show up. But if you like how it looks, try adding some more pigment than I did here, and you'll probably get something pretty close to how it looks in this shot. After applying the orange wash, I repeated the same process, but used a mixture of orange paint and white paint this time instead. Here's some of the brown tones I used to tint the base of the statue. I decided I wanted a darker concrete than the baby head, as not to distract from the baby head visually. I think the key here is to work pretty small. It's very tempting just to make big strokes that cover everything, but it'll look better ultimately if you take your time and do little washes. Again, this is mostly covered in snow ultimately, so I don't know how much it mattered, but theoretically, if you weren't gonna just cover the entire model in snow at the end, adding small washes to different parts of the concrete will create color contrast that makes it seem more realistically weathered than if you were to just try and do it with like a couple big washes that covered the entire surface. I used some GW Nihilism oxide on the bronze areas, and splashed some orange enamels around on those same areas once the edgelord oxide had dried. I used some light green here, again pretty sparingly, in order to just add some tonal variation. It's hard to tell exactly how the washes will look when they dry, so I tend to steer on the side of caution and not put anything too heavy on, just doing like very watered down light washes, waiting for one to dry and stacking them on top of each other. This is something I'd never done before and came across by accident just during the process of painting this. I mixed some acrylic white paint with odorless paint thinner, and it dries in this way that kind of looks like bird shit if you paint it on sloppily. I mixed some of this Mod Podge hard coat with these little grass bits. You could use plain old matte varnish here if you wanted to get the same effect, and if you combine that out with water, it'll turn into this forbidden pesto sauce, which will look a whole lot like moss when it dries. I found I was able to get better results by smearing it around with my finger instead of using the brush. It just like stuck and clumped better. It'll also dry much darker because right now it's mixed in with the Mod Podge, which dries transparent but looks white currently. If you wanted it to be closer to this color, you could mix in a light green, a little bit of white paint. The teddy bear paint job was pretty basic. I base coated them each with a different shade of brown, then mixed that brown with a tiny bit of arid earth, working my way up until a final dry brush of pure arid earth. Then I painted all their bows different colors, and I wanted the presents to be different colors from each other too, so they'd stand out. But yeah, I didn't want to use any super saturated tones. I mixed a little bit of gray paint into any paints I had that I thought were too saturated. To get the leaves to stick to the base, I made this paste that's a mix of two different shades of brown paint, Mod Podge, Sealer, normal Mod Podge, and black. Here's a longer clip of that, even though I'm done explaining everything, just because I like how the paint looks when it swirls. Again, because we have Mod Podge in here, which is currently white but will dry clear, it'll be darker once it's dry than the brown tone you see here. But the main point of this isn't color. We're going to mostly just put different flock texture and leaves on top of this, so very little of it will be visible in the final model. The leaves you see me putting on now are from a company called Secret Weapon, which I don't think makes leaves anymore. I tried checking a little while ago, but Green Stuff World has leaves still. And those are the lighter ones that you can see me putting on here. Using different colored leaves will add realism. I like the desaturated yellow ones the most, but having a couple orange and red ones scattered throughout are good for variety and contrast. I use the brush at first to stick them to the base, but if you don't mind getting your hands a little messy, I think using a finger is better because you can control the pressure. And after I was done putting that layer on, I did the same thing, but I mixed some weathering pigments in this time and baking soda for texture. This top layer of paste is going to be seen a bit more than the bottom layer, which is why I'm trying harder with the pigment. And I sprinkled a little bit of the green flock from earlier that we used to make the moss with too. And in the end, after all that, you get this the diarrhea, which is spread liberally on top of the model, and then I take some of the moss by itself and put that on top so that it looks like there's a little bit of grass showing through. Texture and tonal variety are going to add a lot of realism here. I used a very small brush to apply it to areas that are close to the base decorations. I wanted them to stand out and really didn't want to cover them. And for even more foliage variety, I have all these little shrubs that I've gotten from various companies over the years. Model train stores are really great for getting these kinds of things. Stores that sell historical scale model kits will usually have a bunch too. I use the Gorilla Clear Glue, again the non-foaming kind. I gotta really stress that, do not use the foaming kind to glue these down, but you could use super glue if you wanted to too. Or even, I mean, PVA would be fine. I let this dry overnight before moving on to the next step. The Gorilla Clear Glue takes quite a bit of time to dry. Damn, I really love these bears. I'm gonna print a million of them for my orcs too. Wait, no, sorry, that was wrong. Before letting them dry overnight, I also sprayed them down with some spray adhesive, the same kind from earlier. This is probably mostly just gonna be a display piece, but I want to have the option to use it for gaming, and the spray adhesive will really help the leaves not fall off. Hello, good morning. How did you sleep? It's the next day, and we're putting Mod Podge on top of the leaves again. In hindsight, I kind of like this more as just like a fall foliage thing, and I went too hog wild with snow and kind of regret it now. But I'm not all the way done painting it yet, so we'll see if the regret sticks. But because this is a Christmas video, I made some snow using baking soda, white paint, and Mod Podge mixed together. I used normal miniature white paint here because it's all I had, but if it's not a pandemic or you are willing to wait for Amazon to drop some white paint off for you, just use that instead. Any craft paint will do. I looked at some reference of melted snow in the woods, but yeah, I put way too much fucking snow down, dude. Like, the amount you see right now is like the amount I should have done. Yeah, it's way too thick. I mean, you'll see it soon. Ooh, yeah, that big glob on the right hand side is the beginning of the end. I am pretty happy with how this cross turned out though. I was like, it's just the right amount. See a little touch, just a couple globs in there, make it look like, you know, like a sad shot of a cemetery in the snow from a movie. Just a tiny bit, and tried not to cover up like any of the moss or like the stone part underneath completely. For the trees, I just went ape shit. I think having a lot of snow in the trees was good, and it's the one part that I'm happy I put a very, very heavy amount on. This stuff is great. It's hard to be precise with the baking soda method and just put like a tiny bit of snow on, so For any of the areas, like the top of the baby head in particular into statues, and then like the presents, I used the Valhalla Blizzard by Citadel. Yeah, here's me doing that. As you can see, it's a lot lighter. You can almost like dry brush it on, and while it's still wet, you can like smear it around if you feel like there's too much in a certain place. And it's good for creating like a light frosting effect too. I don't want to put too much on the bears, but I wanted a little bit just to show that they had been sitting in the snow. And I figured their fur probably absorbed most of the moisture, so it makes sense that there wouldn't be that much snow on top if it's in the process of melting. Just like doing the leaves earlier, using my finger, I was able to get more pressure and apply the snow in a way that it like stuck to the surface better than when I was using a brush. And I just got back from doing a second pass of leaves and grass on top of the snow, and I'm a lot happier with it now. For all those out there who put too much snow on their model, if you just put like the same steps that we did earlier with covering it with like leaves and the flock and some flowers on top of the snow after, it'll help blend it in. Just know there's hope for you. We have a $1 billion clown farm Discord server, and this month there was a winter terrain challenge. Discord user Ennui from Kotodama Heavy Industries made this super cool looted sleigh shop. User Drizzt, he's not credited as that here, but that's his Discord name, made this. Skirt, I'm assuming along with the help of his 2nd edition Necron Warriors, made this cool ice crystal monolith type thing. Hotlight made this insane Orc Christmas workshop, and I don't know when the next time we're gonna do challenges, but I'm gonna open it up to Instagram too. This one was a little last minute, so it's Discord only. But if you want to join our Discord, it's free, and I'll put a link in the video description. I also want to give a big thanks to the band War Troll. They're a great Warhammer metal themed band, or do they want to be called that? I don't know. They're a metal band. They're good. They like Warhammer, and they let me use their song, and it's a very good song. Thanks for letting me do that. I also want to give a big thanks to everyone who supports me on Patreon. You help out the channel a lot, and let me buy food and Warhammer supplies, and yeah, it's definitely a huge motivator. If you want to support me on Patreon, I'll have a link to that in the video description below too. Also, Discord user Iric started making this Stampa inspired by my last video, and it's very cool. Thank you for sharing. Iric, thank you to you and your Stampa. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to plug. Goodbye. Wait, no, first, Merry Christmas. Okay, now goodbye.